Morning there, everybody. Today, got a little Ford Everest 2015, 6-speed trans, so 6R80. The new ones have got the 10R, so 10-speed, obviously. Now, customer complains, lovely lady, that she's had some weird bells and whistles on the dash, traction control, a couple other little symbols coming up. And also a bit of fluency issue with transmission gear changes, and also a point on a day where I couldn't start the engine, so I had ignition, everything was alive, but wouldn't start, so I had to get the RAA out. So anyway, so there was a few codes that the RAA had brought up. I had a look at all the codes when she gave them to me, the sheets, and I sort of narrowed it down to obviously a transmission issue. Electronics, it's always electronics, it's always something silly these days. So anyway, so we've got the car to my house, which I drove here no problems. So this is intermittent, but it's catching out, all right, as in it already didn't start at the shops. So no one needs that, especially with kids, hot days, blah, blah, blah. Not ideal, all right, so it's got to be fixed. Anyway, so I've plugged into the car. I have downloaded all the codes after they were cleared by RAA a couple of weeks ago. So the one that's come to light, so I went straight to the transmission control module, so TCM, and there was a code for the range sensor. So I'll show you what it was, and this is a generic code worldwide, but it sort of narrows things down to us, and I'll do some testing and some bit of research, and we'll go from there. All right, so I'll just show you what it is, and then we'll go through what the range change sensor actually does. So when we talk range sensor, it's obviously, you know, is it in reverse, is it neutral, is it drive, is it first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, etc, etc. All right, so very simple sensor, still operated by a cable from the shifter in the cab. Now, just got to add that most of the new cars have a range sensor also on the actual shifter or the T-bar in the actual car, truck, whatever, and that generally sends signals to what's usually called the BCM or the PCM, so the power control module or the body control module, and that tells other computers we're in drive, we're in reverse, so put on the reverse camera, reverse buzzers, lights, you know what I mean, etc, etc. So that's a sensor which is always an input to a computer, all right, and then the computer will get that information and it will act upon something to achieve what it's been told to do. All right, so really, like a human, if you lick something and it's sour, it's sweet, well, the brain receives that information and works out, ugh, that's crap or that's good, and then it will send the information back to the tongue, give it another lick, she's beautiful. All right, so that's the output. Input, is it any good? Output, lick it again or lick it twice, whatever, it's good. All right, so anyway, so I'll just turn the camera around and then we'll have a look at this code. Right, I want you to remember this code, because if you see this code, two things. I think it's either going to be a wiring issue, going by this and experience, or it's potentially, well, it's going to be the sensor. All right, so let's have a look, we'll go from there. Here we go. All right, so done the download and I've printed it out. Okay, 2015 Everest. All right, it's basically a Ranger, guys. All right, 3.2 turbo, 6-speed. Okay, 4x4. All right, so TCM, so transmission control modules. That's the module that controls the transmission outputs and inputs, or receives the inputs, remember, which is a sensor. Okay, so P17020028 transmission range sensor circuit. Okay, so that is the sensor in the transmission that receives, is it reverse? Hang on, I'll stick my foot on the brake here. Hang on a minute. All right, so reverse. This is moving a cable at the trans, and the cable is linked inside via a spool on this model trans to a range potentiometer. All right, so it just turns and basically moves a magnetic bar, which I think is going to be the problem anyway. All right, so reverse, that's an input to the TCM. Okay, neutral, moves the cable, tells the trans what's going on mechanically, but also sends a signal to the TCM that we are in neutral, all right? So it can communicate with the rest of the car to tell that we are in neutral, okay? So obviously it's linked to a lot of the safety items, etc., etc. And then drive. And then obviously if we shift over, we got plus, or we can manually go down, all right? So neutral, reverse, park. Now, for any TCM or module to get transmission range sensor circuit intermittent fault, okay, we have an issue with the sensor, okay, or the wiring. It's as simple as that. So what's actually happening is, if we have this selector in park, right, but the transmission range sensor in the trans is saying reverse for 0.001 seconds, well, that's what we call intermittent fault. So there is deviation between the sensor in the trans and the sensor that is connected right to the bottom here, okay? So if we're in park here, it should register park down there, okay? And that's how it gets this code, okay? I would have said that when the nice lady went to start it the other day, it was obviously in park, but the transmission probably had, for some reason, it was scrounged to drive or it was in reverse. So it's actually enabled the inhibit, or it's gone into what we call a safety derate function, so you just can't start the car, okay? No one wants to start a car and it's in drive or reverse. Not good. It was a thing of the past, and there was quite a lot of accidents. So anyway, so unfortunately with the 6R80, the newer transmission, the new one's the 10, all right, that's new again, but compared to the older ones, sort of pre-2012 or 11, I reckon, they have this massive, what's called the lead frame sensor unit inside the transmission. So you've got to take the sump off, or the transpan, take the valve body off, and it's a big bloody plastic piece of thing, all right. That's sort of a multi-function center, and that's very common on these, I do know that, and they are not cheap. So anyway, whereas the original ones, that range sensor was on the outside of the trans, basically bolted to the end of the trans selector shaft, which in my eyes is very favourable for everybody. So anyway, blame the engineers once again. Anyway, so let's have a look at the live data. I'll show you how to look at live data for this sensor, okay? So let's go back. So we want to read the data. All right, so all live data. All right, so live data is basically we're reading all the sensor information. So what's the tongue licking, and is it sour or is it sweet? All right, just remember that. It's an input to the brain. All right, so let's see what the brain is reading here. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll select all of the sensors so we can have a good look. But what we're basically looking for is the range sensor, so select pattern. Alright, so what do we got? Accelerator pedal position, no, we don't need any of that. Let's find the gear command. Okay, gear command 1. So let's just see how this scan tool interprets that. I have to stick my foot on the brake. Alright, so let's forget that. So that's not the right way. So hang on a minute. We have to find range position. Range position. Where are you? Have I passed it, guys? Shift type, park neutral. Yeah, that's correct. This is a bit bizarre, this one. I must have gone past it. Transmission. Oh, here we go. Range sensor. Corrected park. Here we go. Reverse. Okay. Line 65. Transmission range sensor position corrected. I don't know why it says corrected, doesn't matter, all right? That's the input we want to see, okay? So I'm in reverse on the stick, okay? And it's come up straight away reverse. park, park, okay? Reverse, neutral, drive, like, manually shifted. Okay, so it's seeing my manual shifting. Okay, so remember, most of these Tiptronics, they call it, drive, move it over to a manual position. You can upshift and you can downshift manual. All right, the PCM and TCM will tell you, or it will basically cut you out of it. Thinks you're, putting it in first gear when you're doing 80 k's an hour. It still has a safety function there, and it will lock you out. Okay, but you can still have a lot of fun. So manual shifting over. We're now into drive, so let's go back to neutral, to reverse, to park. Okay, now basically what's going on here is, because this fault code is intermittent, I'm not going to see that, if we're in park, I'm not going to see intermittently very quickly if this, reads something like drive or neutral. We can have a look at the graph. So just for shits and giggles, let's get this graph up. Bear with me. Graph. Come on. Oh, no, it won't let me get a graph up. It's not a function on this car. Well, that's a bugger. Anyway, all right, so that's where we're at. Range change sensor. All right, I'm going to have to pull the transmission pan down. Once I've got that out, I know it's not going to be the loom. This thing has only seen the road. The pins are good, and it doesn't give me other codes to say that we have, like a voltage drop or short to ground, short circuit, etc., low, high voltage. This is just basically the sensor isn't moving when it should be. All right, well, actually it is moving when it should be, but the feedback to the computer is incorrect. Yeah, so all right, well, I'll pull the pan off and I'll show you this amazing lead frame range change sensor unit that they got, and we'll go from there. Okay, cheerio.